All right, everyone, we should be live. Let's make sure that's actually the case over on Rumble, of course. I do see people already piling in. Mike White 81 says clank. Greg Schultz says good morning. Mike White again. Yes, the second time, first comment. Just tell us. We love the Hexenhammers in Lincolnton, North Carolina. And the Burlap Sack says tink. So he's not drinking out of a mug with coffee. He's drinking out of one of those little teacups like they have in Europe with the little spoons. Tink, tink, tink. You cannot clank them. If you clank them too hard, they'd probably break. Anyway, we're going to start right in with the news today. We have Trump. They're trying to disqualify him in Florida now, not just, I think it's New Hampshire is the other state. And it'll be very, very funny when these cases don't go anywhere because they're clearly not going to. Although I do see their larger strategy. The strategy is really to hold it over the heads of the voting public and make them afraid that Donald Trump will end up nominated, but then he won't be on the ballot in 5 or 6 states or something like that in order to make people hopefully not vote for him in the primaries. Right now, everything that you're seeing is still to prevent him from winning the primaries, from the indictment gate multi-scandal that we have now from 3 and soon possibly a 4th state, Arizona, of course. That's because of the primaries. What you see with Biden grumping about Newsom trying to debate DeSantis, as I analyzed this morning, it falls right into the same sector. They're afraid that Donald Trump will coast to renomination, and they're afraid of him being in the general. It's going to be really, really hard, I think, to convince most independent voters in the country that a person that's already been nominated should continue to be prosecuted. And then you have pressure possibly on the legal system to suspend those trials during the general election and force that to happen. The Supreme Court could end up stepping in, which would look to liberals like election interference and to conservatives like preventing election interference, and independents will be dragged in both directions by nonstop walls of propaganda. So we'll talk about that. We've also got the Virgin Islands governor pressured prosecutor on Jeffrey Epstein's behalf. That's a fairly big case, which is why you're not seeing much about it in the legacy media. A few conservative sites picking it up, Fox briefly talking about it on page 2, so to speak. That's basically it. And then I wanted to cut the head off the snake on one thing. And by the Frezio, there are spoons available in the merch link. That is in the description. Cross-platform, the merch link to the eBay page there by Pumpkin Fire Productions. And third, this story is something that I wanted to provide some clarity on. Biden is not trying to force you to only drink 2 beers per week. That is hyperbole. It fits right in with the kind of nonsense you'd expect from the Biden admin, but that's not actually what's happening here. So I'm going to be that commentator that tries to clear the air and actually tell you the truth instead of just doing it. I mean, it's almost a Biden derangement syndrome thing because you've got so much juicy shit there where he's saying and doing crazy things and passing, laws that are reprehensible and often ruled unconstitutional. Don't let yourself get distracted by non-stories like this one, but I'm going to talk about it from that perspective because I have to. So the clankers will be immunized against the bullshit that you're getting from certain commentators right now, including right-wing ones. Nick Ray 47, Trump's had my support since 2018 when I saw he is against the establishment. Anyone who gets the hate he does is good in my book. Hashtag Clank Nation. Yeah, some people are like, well, I don't even care about Trump so much as he just triggers all the right people. I happen to like Donald Trump's policies. I saw for 4 years those policies largely worked. The economy didn't have any problems until the China virus era, and so I would reelect him based on that. But yes, it is absolutely also important that every sleazebag, lawyer, criminal scumbag, banker, and every deep state warmongering politician seems to have a stick up their ass against the man. J. Monty 0071, Rick Bob Barker, the ultimate price of right contestant. By dying at the age of 99, he truly got closest to a 100 without going over. Lol, too soon? Actually, you're a day late with that. That joke's been making the rounds for a while now. 487 Sean Tower. Why is the GOP Congress not giving Trump whistleblower immunity by having him testify on subcommittee? They control the House. This is easy to do. Matt Gaetz has an already proposed. It could work. I think the answer is Kevin McCarthy more than anything else. Timothy Finch, hoping the Freedom Caucus actually follows through on its threat to shut down the government if they don't get to funding Jack Smith in the omnibus bill. They will not get defunding Jack Smith in the omnibus bill, which means that the government would shut down until McConnell and McCarthy scramble on in order to override. Whoa, kitty. Yeah, maybe in the other direction is a little bit better. But yes, a Florida lawyer says Trump can't run for president because of the 14th Amendment and files a challenge. Here's the problem. First, you've got a case where there may not be legal standing to actually file the case in the first place. In order to file a case of this kind, generally you need to have what's called legal standing. So, for example, I can't simply say that the NFA is unconstitutional and therefore I'm challenging its legality. You have to prove that you have been in some way aggrieved to get it before a court. This is judicial scrutiny. That's probably not the greatest example because it self-evidently aggrieves everyone in the country because it does violate the Second Amendment. But typically what happens is that the courts won't take up the case and they'll just say you don't have standing to actually file the case in question because you're not a proper aggrieved party. They do this to states. They do this to lawyers, etc. This case, who can possibly bring legal standing in this case? Establish legal standing in this case to actually bring the case forward other than the states themselves. They can. Can some random attorney do so? I don't think so. Secondly, of course, this is in Florida. Court system, they're not quite as amenable to liberal causes as some around the country. What I suspect they're trying to do is slow roll some of these cases, again, to try to make Republican voters fearful that if they vote for Trump and he becomes nominee, that their nominee will end up, not actually eligible to run in a number of states. And the states do have sweeping election power. Here's why this particular case doesn't really make sense. In the case of the 14th Amendment, you're talking about radical Reconstruction era, and the southern states kept taking long-term secessionists and putting them in Congress. And the North said enough is enough about that. We're passing a constitutional amendment to prevent this from happening. And so these individuals were precluded from running for any office. Kind of pig in a pokery when you think about it, but they did successfully pass the amendment and it carried. After certain states were, of course, suspended from participating in the political process for a number of years. That being said, it doesn't apply. Donald Trump, number one, has currently not actually been found guilty of any crime. You can't punish a person before you've actually established guilt, unless it's red flag laws, of course, or something like that, which is regrettable that we've backslidden on the right to a fair trial to that degree, but I digress. Secondly, if Donald Trump were found guilty of literally every charge that he's currently facing, none of them have anything to do with sedition. None of them have anything to do with rebellion. Merely labeling J6 an insurrection does not make it one. Merely insinuating that Trump caused what happened that day does not mean that that is it's an opinion. It's not a legally binding fact. To make it a legally binding fact, you first have to pursue it in court and find evidence therefrom of that happening. But Bragg's cases have to do with fraud. They don't have to do with J6 at all. The records cases with Jack Smith have to do with presidential records. And under the Espionage Act, but again, it has nothing to do with the legal definition of insurrection or sedition. It has to do with paperwork. With the Georgia case, case is technically, the indictments there are RICO and things like that, racketeering. Nothing in there has anything to do with attempting to foment insurrection other than a few awkwardly included lines that, again, are effectively just the state's opinion about it. Does that mean that in a court in another state, you would necessarily have the same opinion happening? No. Does it mean that anyone under the sun has legal standing to challenge the legality of Trump running? No. Does it mean broadly the 14th Amendment applies? No. The other thing that they're hoping to do is to actually succeed in these cases by putting them before sympathetic liberal courts, precluding Trump from being on the ballot in a number of states, and then they're expecting SCOTUS, which typically slow walks things, to overturn the cases, but wait until after the election. They've shown a stubborn resistance towards getting involved before things happen, and typically attempt to ameliorate after things happen. And so their compromise-minded SCOTUS justices would be likely to allow the states to preclude Trump, knowing that it's illegal for them to do so, and simply say, we're taking a hands off because the court is largely conservative right now. It will be seen by the public as election interference. And so we're going to interfere in the election by allowing states to interfere in the election instead. But then afterwards, they clear Trump's name. I think that that is a possibility. However, I think the biggest possibility is they're just trying to scare voters into not voting for Trump in the primaries, worried that he will be precluded from running in certain states thereafter in the general election. I think it's shenanigans, but then again, what else have we seen lately other than shenanigans? BW Sticks, how are you so sure about Gen Z when 70% of them voted Dem in the midterms? Well, I think you'll find, I think it was more than 70% of millennials voted Dem back when we were the same age. So again, the skew is a continuous thing. SP Elite, how the fuck did the GOP lose Wisconsin and Michigan? Honk honk, totally fairly. SP Elite follow-up. Oh, actually, you asked the same thing twice. Thanks for the extra $2, though. Maxwell JW, thoughts on Chris Chan going free? Anarcho-tyranny? I was not aware that he's gone free. I think his 15 minutes of fame have rightfully ended, and he should be in a goddamn nut ward, actually. Let's see. Sigilstone 17. Trump has 3 baby mamas, scammed people, and has his mugshot released. I can't repeat the rest of that on a YouTube stream. You can probably guess where he's going with that, though. Swamp Donkey. It would be funny if they do hit him with the 14th. It just speeds up the rot. What do you think will happen if they manage to hit him with the 14th route? Massive protests? They won't stop him, in my honest opinion. I think that he would end up in the end very possibly winning as a write-in candidate in those states. And here's why. Because at that point, I think that more people would see the transparent shenanigans for what they really are. Maybe I'm too naive. Maybe I'm overestimating the public. But I like to think that at that point, they'll be like, well, this is a little bit weird. You're already planning to put him in jail. Why bother? Because if they have trust in their fellow citizens by and large, then they wouldn't have to worry at that point. They would assume Trump would crash and burn. By the way, all of this is being done out of fear of Donald Trump and also people that might look at Donald Trump if he rises back up like a phoenix and say, look, I can maybe harm the system too. Maybe I can win against them. Maybe I can slash the Hydra's heads off or something like that. Contemporary Compendium. Eugene V. Debs was convicted of sedition and still allowed to run for office. Anti-Trumpers can eat fecal matter. Exactly. I mean, rebellion is entirely different, and it's strictly constrained. The 14th Amendment has to do with the Civil War. It doesn't really have any real modern purpose at all. In fact, they should probably just get rid of it. What's the purpose? Doesn't have any legal bearing. Hasn't been an actual rebellion in the United States in quite some time. Next news story. This is an important one. A now fired Virgin Islands prosecutor, I wonder why they were fired, by the way, has testified that the current governor of the U.S. enclave once pressured her to grant a legal waiver to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The Epoch Times reported Saturday that Denise George, the Virgin Islands Attorney General until late 22, said that Governor Albert Bryan Jr. once contacted her one-to-one to request that she grant Epstein a waiver from travel restrictions. Bryan, who is predictably a Democrat, was telling me that Jeffrey Epstein wants to have this waiver of the travel requirements and that he said his attorneys will be contacting me and encouraged me to meet with the attorneys to consider it, George said under oath. So very interesting. The Dem governor of the Virgin Islands put pressure on the AG there before firing her and in order to grant a travel request for Jeffrey Epstein. Despite the fact that by then you already knew that Jeffrey Epstein was a child molester. You already knew he was guilty of trafficking. There had been a case from some time before, but you still granted the waiver so that he could leave the U.S. Virgin Islands at a whim on a temporary, of course, granted basis. That's very, very strange. I would think that somebody in that kind of legal hot water, and I'm sure the governor would have known what was going on, at least in a general low-key manner from U.S. intel in a more general sense. Hey, keep a strong eye on this guy because there's an ongoing case still into what he's fucking doing. I'm sure that this kind of pressure wasn't brought to bear lightly. Are we going to find that there was a little bit of a bank-linked transfer to the governor of the Virgin Islands? How very interesting the timing involved with that. He knew that he was dealing with somebody who was, into weird stuff and possibly a flight risk. He would have known that because he would have known that Epstein likely knew that there were other things going on because he's so rich, powerful, and well-connected. Dude could have ended up going mainland. walking across the porous border, getting to Mexico, get into a plane and end up in Brazil or something like that. He'd be like the fucking Brazil boys or something. Darun Albane sent you a DM about me having 0 followers, and I can see every time someone reports me, I gain phantom followers. That's weird. Fire down below. What % chance do you think the machine will be able to disqualify Trump from being the Republican nominee, whether it be the states or RNC? The RNC actually has a better odds of doing so. They'd just be batshit to do so. They would end up crippling their own party. Now, the unipartyists don't care because they can always just say, okay, this game is over. We're becoming Democrats, because they'd fit right in. That's possible. It would effectively crash part of the U.S. political system. It'd be anarchy and chaos. And considering anarchy and chaos are funny, yeah, that's not entirely an impossible outcome. It's just more likely they're just going to try to undermine their own candidate. So they'll let Trump get in. Some Republicans will take their toys and go home. Others will back him. They'll deny him money. They'll deny him logistic support and do everything they can to screw him in the general. Then they'll blame Trump for losing, much like they blamed his endorsed candidates when they lost in the 2022 midterms, despite the fact that the Uniparty was screwing them. They'll tell people, well, Trump should have done more. Yes, Donald Trump, while under 4 criminal indictments, going to courts twice a week at least, is responsible single-handedly for propping up literally dozens of candidates while also running his own campaign. It sounds like the TDS sufferers are the ones that declare him God Emperor. Simping for Karumi. Do you think DeSantis is even serious about his campaign? I get the impression he just ran to shut up the DeSimps who begged him to run. He's serious about it. He genuinely thought he had a chance when he was riding at 30. He just waited too long and he did it too awkwardly. He made too many mistakes. Sungmin Balergian. Hey, Sticks. Clank from the Dirty Jers. Sleepy Joe is apparently selling off the remaining UN-installed border wall as a fuck you, uninstalled border wall as a fuck you to Republicans. Yes, although I would point out that after laying there for several years, it's all rusted and fucked up anyway. So, yeah, I mean, he screwed the chance to install the last roughly, 100 miles of additional wall. Loves Cat 63. If Trump were not eligible, they would have brought it up years back. It's total BS, and everyone with a functioning brain cell knows it. Clank on. Agreed. If they thought that there was any legal chance of this, they would have brought the case immediately after J6. Darun Albane, your last Monday's DDT story. They have never been able to replicate the EGG issue in a lab, the egg issue. Yeah, I know. That's because it didn't. That's not what caused it. It was probably leaded gasoline or something like that. None of your business. Do you have any videos about the Führer of Canada? I've talked about Trudeau a few times, but he's Hobbit-like and unimportant. Plantation sensation. I have access to Warner Brothers training material outright denigrating Trump and suggesting the managers do not behave or support him. You should upload that to the internet then. Jack Posoviet's fractured but whole. Rumble equals controlled op. Fox News for millennials. I've got 144,000 subscribers on Rumble. How many people are watching right now, by the way? Almost 1,700. So yeah, it's competitive in the streaming sense with YouTube. I don't consider it controlled opposition. They don't have a problem with the things that I say, and I put my spicy exclusives on there. Same with BitChute. They don't have a problem. Odyssey, Minds.com doesn't care. Even if I were banned tomorrow from YouTube, it's like, okay, well, a chunk of my core audience would follow me onto other platforms, so it barely affect me, ironically. Scarfy the Strange. Trump should get Carrie Lake or someone with a similar axe to grind as VP in case he gets impeached. Yeah, he's got a whole field of different people he can choose for a VP slot. There are plenty of qualified applicants. Let's see. Sigil Stone. Damn, Epstein deflowered the Virgin Islands. Lol. Frinkles. Hey, when's the new redone plant book coming out? Thanks. I've only started it. The forward and introduction are done, and I'm beginning to plan sections now, but I'm also editing, writing. I do childcare, chores, cooking, and all the other things that I have to do in life. So, yeah, it'll take a while. Wasted Bonehead. Good morning from the grave. Here comes our zombie. By the way, there is a link pinned at the top of chat if you're watching on YouTube or cross-platform. It's in the description of my books blog link, Tarl Warwick Books blog at blogspot.com. Go and check some literature out by yours truly. Plenty of edited works, plenty of authored works as well. Political satire, dark humor, crazy shit that makes no sense, lame attempts at satire, and a whole plethora of hundreds of edited works of occultism, herbal medicine, history, anthropology, cryptozoology. Basically, take your pick. If it's something under the general banner of the paranormal or the superstitious or the spiritual, I've got at least one entry for you. Anyway, now that I've pitched my own books. Biden's alcohol czar says U.S. may follow Canada and limit beers to 2 a week. What a joke. The American alcohol consumption recommendations are up for review in 2025. Now, if you just read, this is a lie by structure. Yes, Fox does this too, to the few remaining people who don't understand that yet. If you just read the title there, what would you think? Oh my God, Biden's going to make sure that people are rationed 2 beers every week. Well, that ain't enough for the Super Bowl party. That's not what's actually happening here. I hear that sort of hyperbolic take from a lot of commentators right now in the last 24 hours. They saw this story. They didn't read it, apparently. They flipped their shit and said, oh my God, Biden's coming for my Heineken or whatever beer or wine or whatever you drink. Take your pick. Margaritas, gin and tonic. Who gives a fuck? It's all booze. Except Bud Light. You shouldn't drink that unless it's, a hurricane knocked out the power for a week and it's the best thing you can find other than purified water, actually. Here's the thing. The alcohol czar doesn't design policies that can prevent you from buying or consuming beer. This is a recommendation, and it has to do basically with human health. Canada has been doing this for a while. The going ethos is no more than 2 servings of alcohol per day for a male or 1 for a female. Yes, males and females are biologically different. By the way, the beer test would be a good way of telling what gender a person is. Just saying that liver doesn't respond to estrogen or testosterone the same way some parts of the body do. Here's the thing. The alcohol czar could come out tomorrow and encourage Americans not to drink anything. Well, there is no safe drinking, so leave the booze alone. Let's all be teetotalers. We'll have temperance and shit. You're allowed to have 1 serving on Christmas of mulled wine or something like that. Here's why Biden would never push any proposal that would have legal fangs involved with this. Money. Big time moolah from the liquor industry and all of its cross-advertising friends for the Democratic Party especially. They're not going to do jack shit. Why do you think they do very little about tobacco as well? The educational campaigns that were already working were effectively abandoned in favor of things that self-eminently do not work, specifically because American tobacco is a juggernaut. They said, well, sales have fallen too far, probably. Gen Z doesn't think smoking is cool. They just want to vape all day, and the vapes are all made in China. Quick, we better tackle that fucking issue. They did. It's like when they tackled, Kratom. Why do you think that was? Because it's lucrative to hand out oxys to people. They're not going to come for your booze. If anything, the fact that a lot of people booze up and they get fat and lazy and shit is good for the government because it makes them more reliant on a broken healthcare system and things like that. And it makes more broken homes so they can take more kids away from home, and then they can put them into foster care where they get molested, or they can make them disappear from a care center where they get, enslaved and molested, or something like that, which is exactly what the elites want. They want more kids, so that's why they do that. Why do you think they don't fix the educational system? They don't want you to succeed. They want you to be reliant. If they teach you anything other than memorizing for a test, you might become an entrepreneur and break free of their shackles. You might end up self-employed. Why do you think they penalize the self-employed 15% above and beyond on their taxes? Because they want to disincentivize anyone from doing these things. Booze isn't good for you. You really shouldn't drink if you're not already a drinker. If you're drinking a couple of drinks per day, okay, you're probably not going to get liver cancer. But most people long-term, if they segue into drinking more than that for a while because of stress or whatever, celebrations, they can fall into a pattern. They can fall into a habit. Alcohol is highly, highly addictive. It's also highly habituating. And so, this even if they take this up, what is it? It's a suggestion to people. It's healthier if you don't drink that much. No shit, Sherlock. By the way, the American people don't already know that. Hey, you shouldn't socially smoke because it's a dumb idea. No shit. Hey, don't smoke heroin. You might as well have a placard up there in their office saying don't smoke crack or heroin or something like that. Fallen Hero 4567 sent $1. No chat, thank you. Jared Owen, my dad, ex-OK CPD, wrote a book 20 years ago on safety. Interesting perspective, and the art is fun. I don't know if it ever sold much at all, but it's still on Amazon. Plan to be safe, crime prevention handbook. Interesting. Fire down below. Can you compare China's carbon emissions to the United States? No, because their carbon emissions are so much higher that they're not a comparable number. VW, wait, what's a woman, Trudeau? SP Elite, saw Nicostine Haleberg say Israel doesn't need the US needs Israel. The fuck are wrong with these people? PS 14977518. I don't know what that refers to. Let's see here. Just some numbers. Wasted Bonehead. Sticks, Russ Hanneman is fucking based. True ally to the undead community. Chewing on bones. Will Kincaid. Shout out to DeFreak in chat and our leader, Carl J. Marks, the grand exalted owl, and all the people of the Cone Club cult. Clank, clank. Dan Malone 53. Trump 2024, regardless if he's on the ballot or not. Agreed. Luke Cesra has become a monthly supporter over on Rumble. I thank you very much. That's what I'm talking about. You get some little, looks like a little castle next to your name on Rumble once you become a monthly supporter. I don't know. Next news story. Iowa poll shows Florida governor closing the gap on Trump after first Republican debate. The other day I talked about how people were simping for DeSantis based on that really bullshit poll. It's a push poll. It was conducted by a pro-DeSantis PAC using a sample size of only 400, which means an extreme margin of error, and posits a head-to-head race that doesn't even exist, while saying effectively that if everyone else were to drop out of the race and endorse DeSantis, he would almost be able to beat Trump in the state in which he's most competitive in because he's single-mindedly focused on it. But that head-to-head won't exist. It was conducted by a DeSantis PAC, and yet Fox News still put it on their politics page. Are they too stupid to read the methodology? Or did they just decide, well, you know, we're kind of simping for DeSantis, we'll slap it up here because it looks good? Again, much like with the Alcohol Czar article, where if you just read the title and the tagline, you think Biden is going to ban beer. And then when you read further, it's like, this is just a suggestion, unlikely to even happen. By the way, it doesn't happen until 2025 anyway, when that Alcohol Czar very well may not even be in power. It might get replaced by somebody by Donald Trump. Who probably would say, drink, baby, drink, just make sure it's not woke beer. Much like this, if you go down a little bit, and keep in mind, 90% of the people that scrolled down at all, they read this first part. Donald Trump remains on top of the polls among Republican presidential candidates, but the gap between the former president and his one-time political protege could be narrowing following the first GOP debate. Only then, when 99% of people are no longer reading the article. A new poll from Public Opinion Strategies, a polling firm working for the DeSantis campaign, shows Governor Ron DeSantis closing in on Trump among Iowa voters. The poll, obtained by Fox News Digital, you didn't need to get it obtained, it was already published, interviewed 400 Iowa likely GOP caucus goers and included a ballot test that saw DeSantis rise from 14% support to 21% post-debate. One poll, small sample size, conducted by a DeSantis PAC, and the further problem is that people who actually watch the debate, which were the cherry-picked sample of this poll, are less likely to be Trump supporters because a lot of the Trump supporters were watching Tucker. They were watching Tucker and Trump. They didn't watch the debate until after this poll was conducted. Absolute moonshine, absolute monkey shines, absolute shenanigans, completely bogus poll, paid for by the campaign itself. I mean, it's like Goebbels level of propaganda there. Taco Woman Sandy Ravage. Good morning, Sticks. Been listening since 2015. Love your work. Thank you very much. Matthew Moore. Do you think that Epstein was Mossad? No, I think that he was suicided in his jail cell for knowing too much. Wasted Bonehead. Dave would make a good dictator. However, he doesn't seem to like booze. Keep your hands off my beer, Dave. Mugshot merch. Clank, took your self-improvement advice, Sticks. Check out highly stylized and awesome mugshot merch at mugshotmerch.printify.me. There you go. Next news story. This one is less funny. Unfortunately, Niger is basically teetering on the brink of being invaded right now. The ECOWAS states are already warning them that they're running out of patience. And unlike with Mali or Burkina Faso, it seems they lean more in favor of invading, which is also bad for the ECOWAS states because a majority of the population of their countries doesn't want to invade Niger. Now they've expelled the French. They've expelled the French ambassador. They cut off water and power to the embassy. They forced them out. And effectively, they're saying, fuck you to France. Now, what I see here is that effectually an internalized factional conflict, which is partially ethnic in nature. The president who was ousted was not part of the same ethnic majority as most people in Niger. And that appears to be the real reason why he was ousted. He's working with Western as opposed to Eastern bloc powers, so they wanted to lurch off and be closer to Russia and China, number one. And number two is race. They're using French colonialism effectively as nothing more than a cover for this. They're going to cast this off as, hey, we're the anti-French government. France fucked us for years, so we want them out, and that's why the coup was staged. But that's not really why it was staged. It was staged for money and power purposes. It's a power play by some Eastern Bloc countries. I would tell, of course, people in Niger, if you think that Russia or North Korea or something are liberators, no, they just want you under their thumbs instead of the thumbs of the French and the Western diaspora at large. It's the same shit, different asshole. Your economy is too underdeveloped and your military too small to be able to be a major player. And therefore, like, the best thing you could do is stick with ECOWAS, which is really more of a regional power bloc and actually has some autonomy because the countries have come together for trade and purposes and military endeavors and so forth. In that particular sense, you are really more powerful together than alone. Morocco's trying to join. They have a reasonable military, along with Nigeria. It'd be a fairly powerful bloc, all things considered. That's been stymied for years. So don't think that, I mean, basically you're out of the frying pan into the fire. Your country is largely the Sahara Desert. What you do have is uranium, and it's big in demand, east and west, and they're currently squabbling over your uranium. The French are no longer your colonizers. France is no longer a major player really either. They're one of a number of powers within the European bloc, but their own personal policy can be different, but it doesn't involve most of their powerful and rich friends. For instance, the German piggy bank or something like that. The Dutch tradesmen, the Belgian bureaucrats. It just involves France. But there, I mean, the embassy there, it was not a military facility now, particularly wasn't. And so, yeah, again, out of the frying pan and into the fire. You'll feel very glad about your newfound autonomy until you end up occupied by yet another power, which is inevitable when you're a third world nation. Alan Smithy, good morning from YouTube. Not notifying me about your stream yet again. Free shipping with code hashtag go fuck yourself YouTube. I still like YouTube, but it gets worse and worse over time. Awesome Diesel, shout out Acme Diesel powered rockets. I haven't seen Anton yet. Did I miss him, or is he not here today? Maybe the stream was a little bit too late for me. I had to go to sleep or something. Next news story. Maui's outdated bare electrical wires and leaning poles caused wildfires to spread rapidly. Now, hold up a second. I was told that the world getting hotter is what caused the Maui wildfires. Of course, they're still going to blame them. Well, there wouldn't have been a drought if it weren't for SUVs or the cow farts or something. Could it be that their Democratic Party-led infrastructure simply sucks dick because they were using old electrical poles, wooden electrical poles from like the middle of the atomic era? I mean, you can get away with that in like rural New England where, you know, it rains constantly, and a drought in Vermont is basically 3 days straight without rain. That will trigger a drought index in the state of Vermont. It's a very, very humid climate. Normally, Hawaii is similar, but they had a bit of a drought. And then their electrical lines got damaged by wind, and they came down and lit a linear fire stretching for a significant distance. And it got out of control very quickly. It appears to be why a lot of people were trapped, because the fire was spreading out on both sides for a considerable distance. Well, as it's moving towards you, you have to be able to run to one side or another faster than the fire's marching towards you, or you head to the beach. A lot of people took shelter there, apparently, which would suck. Imagine there's like a fire raging behind you, and then you have to sit on the beach in the water for like several hours while the fires very slowly peter themselves out, knowing that you're going to go back generally to finding your home gone and probably your dog dead. Not necessarily the most fun of times. So it turns out that their electrical services there, and their government, of course, is blaming them singularly now, weren't maintaining the lines properly. Of course, the state government has influence over the decisions of corporations within a state. They don't appear to have really pushed the issue. It's interesting how they're single-mindedly attacking the electrical company, their Hawaiian electrical company, left wires naked despite a recent push by utilities and other wildfire and hurricane-prone areas to cover up their lines or bury them. Okay, they were pushed by other utility groups. Where does it say that they were pushed by the state government to keep to their timelines and make sure that things were hardened a little bit more? You're on a tropical island. You have seismic activity. You have high wind activity. Sometimes it's very wet and typhoon-like. Sometimes it's very dry. You've got all the major natural disasters other than like avalanches present on your island, and yet you didn't harden the electrical infrastructure? Okay. But it's all the electrical company's fault. They totally, yeah, like they wouldn't have done it faster if the government said, hey, maybe we're going to remove your contract if you don't get your shit in focus. Here's a grant. Replace the goddamn lines, at least insulate them. Wood doesn't do as well as the newer steel poles that tend to be used, or you can bury them. Well, and then the wind is no longer a problem. By the way, neither are wildfires. Bury the lines. They do this all the time. The one thing that Biden has said in his whole presidency that I agreed with was early on the suggestion of weatherizing our electrical grid by burying all the power lines. Great idea. Oh, it'd take a huge amount of money and time, and I'm sure that the amount of lines that are actually being buried from the infrastructure bill is minuscule compared to the amount of lines that exist. But yeah, other than the high tension lines, you can bury them. It's not difficult. Woodstock did that 100 years ago. Rockefeller moved in and had a mansion there and said, I don't like seeing all these fucking telephone poles and electric lines. I want them underground. So he decided to finance it, and they buried them, and it's definitely good for tourism. Never saw them as a kid around me. There were none. They're all buried. Let's see. Censored. Me so horny. Me love you long time. Furious George. Ghislaine's dad was Mossad. This is well known. Epstein was Mossad, as was Ghislaine. It's possible, but I don't have any direct evidence of him being Mossad. Groza. Trump said he would end the Ukraine conflict when he gets into office. What do you think would be in his playbook to do that? Scale 1 to 10, how mad would the Uniparty be if they get cock-blocked out of World War III? They'd be big mad because he would probably be successful. In the end, it would take the form of pressuring Ukraine and saying, look, we're not going to continue to aid you unless you're in open discussions with the Russians. That means you will end up ceding land, but the rest of Ukraine will end up NATO. That's probably the end of the conflict. In the end, that's probably what will happen. Swamp Donkey. Maxwell's dad was high up in Mossad. Epstein was 100% an intel asset to Mossad, CIA, and MI5 and 6. Again, it's entirely possible. All we know is that he catered to a lot of rich and famous people and apparently did hold blackmail material. Wasted bonehead. I'll take some of those rockets, Awesome Diesel, but only if they come with free anvils. Scarfy the Strange. So they hired Dennis Nedry for this? Yeah. Sigil Stone 17. What's happening in Niger is terrible, but I cheer on any nation that tells France to forget life for any reason. You missed a Rumble rant of mine. It contains solid advice for clankers. Yeah, I mean, I can't be too sympathetic towards the French in this particular endeavor. Sigil Stone 17, the missing chat. For people that whine about Russia so much, they get a lot of czars for this and that, almost like a subtle signal on their real allegiances. The best bar test for women is to put Cialis in her drink. I don't think you should do that. I think that would probably be illegal. Let's see. The Patriot Cairo. Lockdownerism pre-announced as the plan unfolds. I can't read the rest of that on a YouTube live stream, but I do agree with it. People can see your chat. Yes, they are planning new fascism at this time. It's beginning to spread. I'm seeing people reporting that a lot more people are masking up, even though there hasn't been a mandate generally brought back, like in public. People are getting afraid, and it's like, come on, let it go. Joe Hoffman, Wom to all. Have a great morning, everyone. Clank. And then the final news story, the fragmentation of the old world order. Yes, BRICS may or may not be expanding over the next few years. A number of nations have been invited to apply to join BRICS, including Argentina, where, depending on how their election goes, it probably wouldn't happen, along with Egypt and others. Egypt has strong Western ties in the military and economic sense. I'd say it's not necessarily likely that they join BRICS because of that tangle of alliances and diplomacy. Others probably will. I would be surprised if BRICS didn't spread. I would point out, number one, it's the West's own fault that it is seeing BRICS rise up. Number two, it doesn't matter if BRICS rises up. If all of the world were BRICS, like China runs everything, people in many cases wouldn't notice much of a difference, actually. We're already becoming more like China in the West. We've effectively created our own problem. China would not have the diplomatic latitude that it did if the United States had stuck to its civic traditions. It wouldn't have the economic capabilities it had unless we decided to try to drag them out of communism by selling them Coca-Cola inadvertently making them powerful while their authoritarianism never went away, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, on down the line. And that's just China. India, by the way, waffles on the tippy edge of BRICS sometimes. Under Trump, it looked like they were going to move westward ho. Once Biden got elected, they thought different of it. I think that they'll think different of it for quite some time with regards to Trump being reelected. I don't think it magically dragged some of these countries westward as much as it did in his first term. Unfortunately, that'd be the case with North Korea because they realized, hey, he can't get reelected, and the next dude probably a warmonger, so we're not going to make any long-term plans. That's a really big problem. The West has weakened itself. BRICS is rising up, but guess what? The investor class doesn't care. The truly super wealthy don't just have investments in one country. They diversify. If I have, this is a problem with it. This is why politicians shouldn't be able to have any form of foreign holdings or holdings in any company that has foreign holdings. It should be all made in the USA because you get a conflict of interests. Let's say that I'm the president or some high-ranking politician, and I've got $100 million in U.S. stocks and bonds and funds and everything else, $100 million. But then I've also got $100 million in businesses in China, et cetera, et cetera. Am I going to be unbiased in a vote that has to do with U.S.-China trade relations? No, of course not. That's my whole portfolio. Let's say that I'm diversified beyond. I've got investments in 17 different nations. Do I care if the United States economy suffers so long as one of those nations is enriched in the process? No, it's going to be about who's willing to bribe me the most, and that other country is more likely to try to bribe me. This is a big problem within politics. It's globalism. BRICS rising up doesn't scare George Soros. He's got a shit ton of money invested in BRICS countries. If they expand further, it just means that the country, instead of being a Western country, is paying him dividends. Then it's a BRICS country paying him dividends. He doesn't give a shit. You think Klaus Schwab cares? You think any of the bigwigs in Brussels care, or DC or Wall Street? They don't give a fuck. You're crazy to put all your eggs in one basket if you're a multi-billionaire dollar investor. Of course you're invested in multiple countries. Even if your home country collapses, you've still got yours. So it makes them care less about their home countries. That's the long and short of it. They really genuinely don't care. They don't consider this to be a concern at all. You should be concerned more about trade deals than about the rise of BRICS and competing currencies. I don't give a shit about that. The dollar will remain on top, generally speaking, for a very long time, and I don't really care about that. You should be worried more about the revival of the TPP. You've even got some Republican candidates now simping for it, like Vivek Ramaswamy. Yeah, let's allow multinational firms across the Pacific screw one another's own working class and small businesses. Yay, what a great time. Vietcong.com just moved its headquarters to Austin. And, the Texas barbecue conglomerate just shoved every meat market out of existence in southern Vietnam. Did it help anyone? It made governments a lot of money, and it made those corporations a lot of money. Did it help small business owners? Did it help the people with the meat markets? Did it help the competing .coms for communist line themed clothing selling to the hipsters that was over in Austin? No, it didn't help anyone. It only helped the conglomerates. By the way, please do not send any more super chats. I'll probably go off a little bit early today. I had a fairly busy morning. Me and Liz went out actually for a brunchin'. It was really good, by the way. Croquette. If you haven't tried croquette, you should definitely try. Joe Hoffman won't. Oh, I already read that one. Kyle Miller, why did we get the Jacksonville Manifesto immediately, but have not gotten the Nashville Manifesto even after months? I think you can probably answer that for yourself. The obvious is the answer. Blue Golier, our series Hillbilly Horror Show has a funny skit on Kim Jong-un in Volume 4. Interesting. Witch Doctor, ting tang, walla walla bing bang. Good song, by the way. BW, bah, says the sheep. Think they're all going to 2020 us? Maybe. The Patriot Cairo. Globalist establishment psychopaths laying the groundwork for mass mail-in ballots again. Vote early and often. They know they can't win, honestly. Yes, they are setting the stage for that already. They're pulling out all stops right now because they're so butt-fuck afraid of Donald Trump. 487 Sean Tower, India never waste an opportunity to stab the West in the back. The level of hatred coming from expats in the US, in the UK, off the scale. I don't know. I like India. I like the Indian people. I'd say that their government has some fucking issues, although Modi's better than the Gandhis, I guess. Sigil Stone, notice the nations in BRICS: China, Russia, South Africa, now Egypt and Argentina. It's a well-named bloc. Those economies are BRICS. Well, Egypt has a functioning economy and a decent military, but they've typically leaned west, and it looks like Argentina may force out the socialists and become almost a libertarian country under Javier there. So we'll see what happens with their election. That'll have a huge impact on the possible expansion of BRICS. There are other countries that have applied to join BRICS but haven't been formally given an invitation. So right now, everyone else is in limbo. It's just those 5 countries. They'll admit a few of them. We're not sure how big the block will become. And by the way, I have to go off now. Just a sec. I'll All right, I thought that was Liz coming back, but it was just the mail. Anyway, I'm going to go offline now because I have other things that I must do. At some point, I should prep dinner. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to eat. I had it in mind, maybe fried fish or something like that, because I make a really, really good, nice golden crispy on the outside, perfectly cooked on the inside. I am a whiz at making fried fish with kabeljau, of course, which I think is codfish, but I'm not 100% sure. Could be something lost in translation. I will, of course, be back tomorrow in order to stream once again. So I hope that you'll all tune in then as well, because it's a good time had by all. That's about all. Peace out.